Is this the new best Pestilence build? As many of us are aware, Pestilence did not get a buff during the Project Resolve, TU20, Year 5, Season 3, whatever we want to call it. It didn't get a buff. Every other LMG did, but Pestilence didn't. Now, contrary to popular belief, the best build for Pestilence is still going to be high end. We are able to get more bullet damage out of things like strikers, and we are certainly able to get a little bit more out of the tick when it comes to things like Heartbreaker. However, when it actually really comes to how you want to play with Pestilence, you kind of need to find a weird balance between the two. I see so many builds that are like, oh yeah, look at my 2.4 million tick damage, and it's just sort of like, yeah, but your bullet damage is actually pretty terrible, and no matter how you want to look at it, the bullet damage from Pestilence is where the majority of your DPS is coming from. You should always aim to kill with bullets, but if they do get suppressed and they end up dying to tick, this is just an added bonus and one of the main reasons we all like Pestilence. So, how can we actually maximize this? How can we really push this to its limit? Well, this actually came about during one of my streams, and it was ElfMZ. I did actually ask him if he had any socials that he wanted me to add to this, because obviously it's not my build, it's a build that he put forward. So we're just going to push forward because he didn't actually respond. So makes my job a little bit easier, but still, thank you very much, ElfMZ. Now, when it comes to the Pestilence ticks, there are a few things that do get added to it. Damage to armor, damage to targets out of cover, damage to health, your all weapon damage, your specific weapon damage, and a few bits of total weapon damage, and then some multipliers, specifically being glass cannon. Now, with the title update 20, one of the brand sets was actually changed to be looking rather interesting, and as long as we're able to get some pretty decent crit out of it, and one of the reasons I was mainly hesitant to do this is because I quite often forget that we can reroll exotics. So now that we can reroll exotics to put critical hit chance on Pestilence, that 3-piece Regnbue for that 30% LMG damage is actually looking pretty juicy. If we now add in 1-piece Petrov, we can actually get some hefty Unga Bunga out of it. Now annoyingly, this is a heavy unicorn farm. It will not be an easy farm if you want to go this route. So the build I'm proposing is quite simply 3-piece Regnbue. Now, the way it is set up to be at its maximum performance, like I said, is a hell of a grind. We basically need 3 unicorns. The Regnbue holster to come with crit chance, crit damage, so that we can change the core to red. A backbone backpack for perfect unstoppable force, again, crit chance, crit damage. And then the real kicker is going to be the chest, crit chance, crit damage. And annoyingly, I can't put the talent in the builder, but we do want glass cannon. It is a hell of a grind. In fact, in the footage that I'm showing here, I still don't really have a worthwhile backpack. I'm just using any backbone backpack that came with a crit roll on it, so I can at least get the pieces up and showing together so that I can actually put a video together about it. As it is actually a Pestilence build that I'm genuinely very happy with, and it kind of puts Pestilence a little bit back on the map. It's still going to now be completely and utterly the weakest LMG. It really is. Simply because it is the only LMG that did not get a buff. However, we can compensate for that slightly with this build. We essentially end up with 100% weapon damage and 70% LMG damage. It is pretty darn hefty. And it's probably the only build, although you could put other LMGs on this build and get some decent use out of it, it's really only going to shine with something like Pestilence because you're compensating with both weapon damage as well as tick damage, whereas other LMGs are just going to be looking more for the actual DPS, in which case builds like Heartbreaker and Strikers are going to be so much more useful. So again, you can put any LMG on this, but it really is just going to shine with Pestilence. There is also an alternative to this, just to maybe ease up on the farm a little bit. It's like barely 1% weaker. It is a tiny bit weaker, but like barely. You won't really even notice it. And all we're doing here is swapping out the Regnbue chest for a Regnbue mask, and we're utilizing Cheska again with glass cannon. So this will be a little bit easier to farm. It still does mean that we kind of need to get the Regnbue mask, holster and backpack that we want, but it's a little bit easier simply because we're not doing that absolute mental grind with the Regnbue chest, trying to get crit chance and crit damage. Now, I imagine some of you are going to be going, well, you've been mentioning glass cannon a lot. Is that kind of required? And kind of yes. The simple reason for this is the way in which the damage calculation works. Perfect Unstoppable Force really actually isn't all that powerful unless it is the only source of total weapon damage in your build, or you have an actual amplifier to go with it. What I mean by this is where the main pieces that we're looking for here is just going to be the 3-piece, the 30% weapon damage, or LMG damage more specifically. The 20% explosive resistance actually offers barely nothing to our build. The 25% health, don't get me wrong, it's nice, but it's not offering us anything to the build. If we were to add in something like Chestgut, Grupo, Walker and Harris, Contractors, Foxes, etc., with Unstoppable Force, and then Obliterate if you wanted, due to the way in which it's going to scale with better brand set bonuses, Perfect Unstoppable Force genuinely struggles to actually get started. In fact, I did quite a bit of work with this during the early days of when this backpack first came out. Perfect Unstoppable Force against a build using Cheska Grupo or even 3-piece Providence, etc., really only started to shine around the 5th or indeed the 6th stack, which means you're basically always behind until you're basically at max stack, which for most engagements, if you're playing solo, will basically be towards the end of the fight. However, if you run an amplifier or don't have a damage talent on your chest at all, it's the second stack that will outperform normal Unstoppable Force on Cheska, Grupo, Providence, etc., Walker and Harris even. It's the second stack where it outperforms it. So, ideally, you do really want to run something like Glass Cannon, which I'm aware some of you don't actually really want to hear. Although, that being said, like I said, you don't actually have to run a damage talent. It will be a slight decrease in its overall capability. However, it is going to be entirely up to you on how you wish to play. If you wish to go maximum Unga Bunga, Glass Cannon is going to be the way to go, and it does actually perform very well due to, one, the overall bullet damage. It ends up being like a 2% increase in overall DPS when we just look at bullet damage. When we take the tick into account, we've gained like an extra 300,000 per tick, which is no small feat. At maximum capability with a build similar to this, the previous best in slot build for Pestilence, our ticks were 1.143 million. Now we're hitting 1.458 million, which is pretty damn hefty. It actually gets to a point, and I'm aware Pestilence is kind of twitchy at the moment with its UI and it's a bit buggy, but you can already see there that that dude who wasn't even at full stack was getting 1.3 million in ticks, which is pretty damn impressive considering we're actually not focusing on it being a tick build. We're focusing it being more of a DPS build, allowing our bullets to do as much as they can, and they get finished off with the ticks if needed. So, anyway, I am pretty damn certain that this is probably the new best in slot Pestilence build. It does actually give Pestilence that little bit of a buff that a lot of people were upset that it didn't get, but it is performing very, very well. Now, I'm aware some people go, oh, 1.4 mils low on the tick, I can do bloody blah, but I can guarantee you don't actually have this level of DPS. See, problem is when you build for a tick build, it's a lot like comparing your dick size. No one actually cares. Or you shouldn't really care. The simple reason for this is, at best, 14% of your DPS comes from your tick. So, yeah, I mean, between each tick, so it goes one tick, you have fired 10 bullets, roughly. If you've got something like strikers on or you've rolled for rate of fire, it will be slightly different. But you have fired 10 bullets. Those 10 bullets can very much easily do outperform your tick damage. I'm doing about 700k a shot, roughly. Which means after 2 bullets, I'm doing more than my tick. Yeah. Therein lies the problem with Pestilence. Anyway, just to show the build again on screen. Coyote's Mask, obviously. A Regnbue chest, and as you can see, I am running Glass Cannon. A Regnbue holster. Contractors Foxes, and the backpack still needs work. I will be farming for a better backpack. Obviously running gunner, and I've got a sledgehammer rifle as well. As you can see, I've got 115% all weapon damage, 15 of it expertise, but I've got 70% LMG damage. This is pretty damn huge. Have fun. Good luck. Don't die. It's bad for the health.